You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Fast ship. Never heard of the William Fall?
Should I have?
It's the ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
What a piece of junk.
Covering Star Wars vehicles in less than 12 parsecs, this is Start Your Engines.
Don't get technical with me.
Here are your hosts, Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold.
You're listening to Start Your Engines. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who, if he was driving in AT-AT, he would literally stomp across the car park.
I have done on many occasions.
How you doing, Paul?
I'm all right, mate. How are you?
Very good. I'm looking forward to this episode because in previous episodes we've talked about a freighter, the Falcon.
Yep.
We've talked about fighters in TIE fighters. We've talked about speeders in our mini celebration episode.
Yep.
Exactly. Last episode we talked about General Grievous's mini fleet, and there's all sorts of stuff in there. Today we're talking about the Imperial ground forces, specifically the AT-AT.
Yep.
Or the AT-AT, or the Imperial
We'll
Walker.
come back to that.
We definitely come back to that. Or the AC-ACT from Rogue One, and the AT-ST from loads of things, including Mandalorian and obviously Empire Strikes Back and Jedi and other cool stuff like Rogue One. As a kid, my favourite toy for a long time was, of course, the Falcon. But then when that AT-AT, that Walker came onto the scene, the Palatoy Walker in 1980 when Empire came out, that was just the best and still is one of the very best toys. What's your first memory of seeing the AT-AT, just in any arena, whether it was the film or the toys? What's your first memory?
I think my first memory of it was either in a newspaper report. I think there were a few grainy images promoting The Empire Strikes Back. I can definitely remember one of Chewbacca choking Lando Calrissian, but I'm sure there was images in there of the AT-AT, and it is AT-AT. More than anything else, my fondest memory, as you just alluded to, is the toy, the Kenner stroke Palatoy toy that we all grew up with. When that came out, I was quite late getting it, actually. I think my good friend Richard Amos, he had it 6 months to a year before I did. I'd got the Falcon. The Falcon worked brilliantly, not only as a ship, but also as a play set. It was fantastic. Yeah. But then the AT-AT Walker, I think I'm right in saying, was slightly more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was around £30-40, which back in 81 was quite expensive. Yeah. That was the big Christmas present that year, but when I got that, that was incredible. It was just so imposing, wasn't it?
Exactly.
It was brilliant, and the click of the legs, and it was just fantastic. And the fact that you could open it up and stick all your snowtroopers in the back only encouraged you to buy more of them. But it was a great toy, and it still is. Highly desirable, highly collectible. But the thing that I liked most about it was I could turn a light off, put the lights on and the cannons and watch those going.
Chin cannons going.
Yeah. But yeah, such happy memories of the AT-AT.
Absolutely. It was a key scene in that film in Empire Strikes Back. Unusual because the big battle in that film, it's front-loaded, isn't it, that movie? That battle starts at the beginning. And when you see them on the ridge, those sort of 3 to 5 little dots coming forward, there's no stopping them.
Manufacturer.
So it was managed by Kuat Drive Yards. They built it, Kuat and Trala Drive Yards. It's a combat walker, so obviously it's built to go into combat. It's a heavy weapon. If I remember, I think General Veers, who's obviously commanding it in Empire, was part of the team that developed the Walker.
I wasn't aware of that.
That model that you saw, it was used in the Galactic Civil War. There was 2 variants. Now, I didn't know this. This was research that sort of brought this up to me, and I didn't know. There were 2 models. One model was shorter than the other. So the variant was shorter than the earlier model. The variant, if you like, was the one we saw in the Civil War.
Weapon systems.
It had dual Piperl Salern R90C medium blasters on the sides, or its temple. So when you remember the Palatoy one, you had the chin guns that would fire. You had those guns at the side.
Clicking guns on the eyes of the,
exactly.
the head,
or the temples, as they call it here. And a pair of Tamerback MS-1 fire-linked heavy laser cannons on the chin. Yeah. That's the sort of thing you would find on a starship. I mean, they're powerful lasers.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes.
Because of the passage of time and because of the fact that we've now obviously seen the behind-the-scenes stuff more recently in the fantastic documentary series that's been on Disney Plus, where you see the stop-motion photography that went into to actually animate those, something that they don't need to do these days. But the quality of that stop-motion was off the charts for the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, even now, I think when they animate stuff now, I think it might be Rogue One, I could be wrong, but it might be Rogue One when they did CG animation for the ACTs, which we'll come to later. And they did it as a computer-generated image, and it was too smooth. Yeah. And they almost had to do it like stop motion because it's got that unique movement, jerkiness.
Because it felt right for the weight
Yeah.
and the height and the very nature of what it was.
And it felt more
right.
like hydraulics, didn't it?
Yeah, it felt like there'd be pistons and all sorts
Yeah.
of stuff going on, and that it needed to move in that way. So, yeah, I can understand why they would have had to have toned down their capabilities to be able to achieve the look that we knew. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it worked a dream. The AT-AT, and we're going to keep saying AT-AT because it's AT-AT. It was the successor of the all-terrain tactical enforcer, which was used during the Clone Wars. Although it was obviously a far more imposing version, so you got the long legs. It's like a camel, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I always thought of it as a horse, or a dog. I mean, you see the parodies where people take them for a walk and stuff like that. But
I think in the making of Empire back in the day, and I think it was Joe Johnson and certainly Phil Tippett, looked at the sort of the leg motions of an elephant.
Yes,
the way the way the front left and the back right would move together.
Yeah,
it became the standard for ground forces anyway. You're on the battlefield, you're a rebel or a partisan rebel, or just any kind of scoundrel that's causing trouble to the Empire, and you see one of those things, and generally you'd only see one. I mean, at Echo Base, you see 5 of them come in, and you know they're there for business. But to see just one of them, it's generally game over, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's so imposing, because it makes a statement almost, like a luxury car makes a statement, a fancy watch makes a statement. Having an AT-AT turn up on a battlefield makes a massive statement. They cost 150,000 credits, but it's not available for public sale. Now, stepping around a little bit, we see the Raider AT-ST in The Mandalorian.
Yes.
Clearly, that's after the fall of the Empire. So
That's been
these
pimped.
exactly, massively pimped. And these vehicles get out there after the reign of the Empire. Yeah. You couldn't imagine a scenario, and it must have happened. It's a big galaxy. You can't imagine a marauder group getting hold of an AT-AT, which they could. I mean, Ray was living in a downed AT-AT on Jakku, so they were around.
Which was a lovely touch.
It was, wasn't it? To see one of those vehicles, maybe not literally painted up like the Raider was, but used by an outlaw group.
Yeah, heavily rusty one or something that's, on its last legs, literally.
Well, hey, but you imagine the upkeep, getting parts. I mean, there's parts all around the galaxy. Jakku's where you go to get your parts, isn't it?
I've always thought that the AT-AT has been a bit of a metaphor as well. I mean, Echo Base is like a fortress. Yeah. And an AT-AT's like a Trojan horse. Yeah. It's very much, we're mirroring that, and we're using this giant horse or camel or dog to get into this base.
The Battle of Hoth, Echo Base, it's the Helm's Deep of the Star Wars story, isn't it? It's the Two Towers moment, isn't it? Breaking the defences, the good guys are on the run, they're on the back foot.
Like you say, it was such a brilliant thing to put that main battle right at the beginning of the film rather than having it at the end. Yeah. Empire Strikes Back, it's rarely out of my top 2 or 3 films because it just breaks all the rules. But that's what the whole film is about. You've got a rebellion. That's the most rebellious film that we've seen from Star Wars. Apart from maybe Rogue One. Its first appearance really in The Empire Strikes Back. It was such a unique looking vehicle for us as kids when we saw it when
Completely.
We'd have been 9, 10.
And light years ahead of anything we saw in Star Wars.
Oh yeah. The Millennium Falcon feels and still does feel like a character. Yeah. It doesn't feel like a ship. And I think because these mimicked an animal, they felt like a character as well. So all of a sudden you've got the good guys mechanical character, and you've got the bad guys mechanical character. I don't know about you, but I mean, it was always the Falcon versus the AT-AT when I was playing with my figures as a kid.
Totally. And it does have personality because there's that moment in Rogue One. I know that's the AT-ACT, which is actually a bigger vehicle than the AT-AT, but when Baze shoots it with that torpedo and hits it, and you're thinking, yep, and then it just sort of turns and looks at him, and he has that look of, there's definitely personality to these vehicles, isn't there?
Definitely. And the good thing about that vehicle, of course, was with its container bay, the orange container. Yeah. It was obviously a little bit flimsier than your standard AT-AT Walker. It had got that void, if you like, that was plugged by that orange container. That when the fighters attacked it, they could actually do some damage, and it basically broke it in two.
That's right. Well, you see General Merrick takes one down. No,
you had to go with the wedge idea of wrapping your tow cable around.
And you see the U-Wings do the same, don't they? Yeah. But you're right. That's a good point, actually. The armour on an AT-AT, well, Luke says that, the armour's too strong for blasters. So they're not going to do it that way. But with an ACACT, even though it's bigger, nowhere near as tough.
What I liked about it was you'd got a line of vehicles that clearly came from the same stable. Yeah. They'd all got that same sort of head, even down to your mini-rig, your INT4, which is clearly just basically an AT-AT head. But that was great. I mean, if you couldn't afford an AT-AT as a kid, if you had an INT4, you were partway there.
Technical specifications.
20 metres in length, 22.5 metres in height. It's 60 foot plus in height, and it could move up 60 kilometres an hour, so 50 mile an hour pretty much.
That's pretty fascinating. It didn't look like that in the film, did it?
No. but you imagine can you see the thing galloping over the plains? To see an AT-AT, we've never seen an AT-AT at full clip.
Maybe in Robot Chicken.
Hello, I'm Dennis Lawson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Engine specs.
It had a KDY FW62 compact fusion drive system. So we talked about big vehicles in the past when we talked about the invisible hand and such. But those things require so much power that their engine room essentially could power a city for a year.
Yeah.
They're just incredibly powerful. Obviously, an AT-AT wouldn't need the same level, but to have a compact fusion drive system, it clearly gets through a lot of juice because if that's going up any kind of incline, if it's stomping through snow, if any terrain, it's got to get through it. And it is an all-terrain vehicle.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of juice to move.
So I was thinking, Mark, obviously the AT-AT and all the walkers, they've got to be dropped to the ground somehow.
Yeah.
How do they actually get from space or on the peripherals of space to the ground?
So the big warships are able to carry something called a Y-85 Titan dropship. So it's like a big blocky dropship that they use to put the walkers, basically, like you just said, put them on the ground. So they're made by Income Corporation. They've got repulsor units, they've got 4 laser cannons, they've got space to accommodate 4 AT-ATs and 4 scout walkers, so they can carry a lot of stuff down. So I suppose in Empire, you'd imagine that over the ridge, beyond the shield, deployed the AT-ATs, deployed the AT-ST, and then would have flown back to the Executor, or the Executor, as people in America like to say, but it's the Executor, because executors hand out wills and executors execute things. So it's the Executor, I'm sorry. So yeah, so that's how they do it. So basically it's a massive dropship, but they can carry multiple AT-ATs and AT-STs.
Yeah, I'm just sat here thinking that there's some poor guy sat in this AT-AT walker as it's being dropped from a Star Destroyer through the atmosphere onto a planet with his fingers crossed. Don't die, don't die. We've landed, we're okay. Or do they shuttle them down in an Imperial shuttle and then...
I'd rather imagine it's exactly like you just said, that the guy's literally looking out the window thinking, this could be my last ride.
Yeah. That might be why shore troopers wear brown trousers.
That could be. Definitely khaki.
Weapon systems.
They've got 2 Tamerback MS-1 fire-linked heavy laser cannons, as we mentioned earlier, but there are different configurations. So they could have that, or 2 MK3EW heavy laser cannons and 2 FF4 medium repeating blasters. This is for the tech heads. I know this means nothing to anyone. Or, as another configuration, 2 MK2EW medium blaster cannons, and they have also Durasteel foot pads. So on their feet, it's like shoeing a horse. Yeah. Could be walking on concrete on one mission, they could be walking on snow or grass the next. And we talked about hydraulics, shock absorbers, but if they've got Durasteel foot pads, it's going to take a lot of pounding, a lot of pressure. You could do a mission in the morning and a mission in the afternoon. It could be half the galaxy away. They travel fast. After Endor, there is something called a post-Endor refit. Light turbo lasers, Durasteel foot pads, as we've mentioned. So they've got options, they've got refits. It's a vehicle like the Falcon that you can sort of change and customize for different arenas and different requirements.
Cargo capacity.
As a compliment, it's got 5 speeder bikes. We mentioned speeder bikes before we started recording. You mentioned something very interesting about, well, say it, you mentioned about
it hadn't really sort of come to mind until my lad Matthew, when he was growing up, he was born in 2003, so he was perfect for the Galactic Heroes. I've got a fondness for, mainly because it was mine and Matthew's connection for Star Wars. He had the AT-AT Walker as a present the one year, and it came with a little speeder bike, a white one. So rather than the brown that we traditionally see on Endor, which figures because of the trees, you got a white version of the speeder bike because of the snow. I think there have been versions from the 3 3/4 inch line where they have released some speeder bikes with the white plates on it as well. It would have been great to see, and like I said to you before, if ever they did go back, and we all have mixed feelings about them tinkering with our beloved films, but if they did drop a few sort of like white speeder bikes on Hoth, I'd be up for that.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
A special edition.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even have to be in a scene that we've already got. They could just be an additional scene where you see them dropping out of the side of an AT-AT walker and then speeding off. Fantastic. I'd just love to see something like that.
The concept and the logic makes all the sense, because in Obi-Wan Kenobi we saw the air speeders, which of course get fitted out as snow speeders in Empire Strikes Back. So that was always like a retrofitted thing in the universe, and we've finally seen what an actual one looks like for real.
You see one in a specific environment, and as a kid, and maybe even as an adult, you automatically think that that's all it ever is.
Yeah.
Had we seen it first on Hoth, And then we'd seen it on Endor. We'd gone, they're camouflaging it for different environments.
Yeah.
But because all we've got as a point of reference is Endor, can't even imagine what the possibilities would have been. And the fact that we have now got speeder bikes in all sorts of different time zones, we saw them in the prequels, we've got them in the sequels. It would just be nice to push it again into Empire.
Crew compliment.
It's got a pilot, it's got a gunner and a co-pilot, 1 commander and 2 deck officers. Its minimum crew is 3, so you can run an AT-AT with just 3 crew. But passengers-wise, 40 troops or more, depending on the configuration. And again, you can change the internals to carry speeder bikes, or I believe you can even fold up ATSDs and fit them inside.
Cargo capacity.
Its cargo capacity is 1 metric ton, so it can't carry a crazy amount, but it could certainly carry a significant amount of whatever it would need to carry, consumables, weapons, anything else. Massive vehicle. It's a staple of Star Wars. On screen, best memory of seeing the AT-AT.
I love the bit on Hoth when it sort of puts a leg out to one side and steadies itself. Yeah. Leaning a little bit and then fires on the defences at the Echo base. And you're nodding away as if that's your favourite.
It is exactly that. It puts its back leg and steadies itself. Yeah. You see a fella at the front of the screen running, and I don't know whether he just tripped over and they thought, we could add something in there. And you see it shoots down and shoots the one guy, and you see him tumble over, and then it shoots towards the power generators. And there's another shot, a similar shot, where it takes out a snowspeeder as well. Yeah. It sort of clips a snowspeeder.
The second favourite one being where there's one that I think they've done the tow cable on it, or they've shot it and it's got all like the lasers flying around the head of it and then the body of it. And then before it drops to the ground, it kinks its leg up. The foot is sort of like partly sort of broken and then it tumbles.
It's like his backside drops on its legs, isn't it?
That's
like the hydraulics have gone on it.
Yeah. Empire Strikes Back in many ways was light years ahead of A New Hope. So different in tone, but with the characters that we all loved. It's interesting that The Empire Strikes Back more often than not comes out as being people's favourite film. It's one of the few ones that Tatooine doesn't appear in. So Lucasfilm, just drop Tatooine every now and then. Just do something a bit different. You never know. People might like it.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So Rogue One back in 2016 introduced the AT-ACT. That's the all-terrain armoured cargo transport. So it is an AT-AT with the guts ripped out and a great big cargo unit in the middle, bright orange. It looked amazing.
Target practice.
Exactly. It's bigger than an AT-AT as well, which is surprising.
Manufacturer.
So it's built by QAT Drive Yards again. It's an all-terrain armoured cargo transport. This costs 125,000 credits. It's cheaper than an AT-AT. It's essentially a practical vehicle, but it can look after itself.
Technical specifications.
It can move at 50 kilometres an hour, so it's a bit slower than a regular AT-AT. But in terms of size, it's 34.9 metres long and 31.85 metres high, so it is significantly bigger than an AT-AT when you stack the two together. Yeah. When you first saw that in Rogue One, I mean, of course, our first thought is AT-AT.
Yeah.
But then straight away, you were conscious that's a big AT-AT. If that's an AT-AT, that's a big AT-AT. And we learned pretty quick that it wasn't a standard AT-AT.
The first thing that you think as a cynical adult is, here we go, slightly different, so they can sell another toy.
Yep.
Why couldn't it have just been an AT-AT? But then it is nice to have these different versions because, you see that wherever you see it, be it in the shop or somebody's collection or on the screen, and automatically you're taken to that particular film or TV show, depending on where it's been placed. But yeah, no, I love the idea that it was actually basically a mule to move stuff from one place to another. And Scarif was such a beautiful location anyway. Yeah. That's why the Emperor Holiday's there, according to Lego. Just smacked of being fragile to me because it had got essentially a hollow part to it, although it had got the container in it. Once that came out, then it had got nothing really to support it if it was attacked in the right place.
Weapon systems.
It's got 2 Tamanbach MS2 heavy laser cannons, just like its slightly smaller brother.
Crew complement.
1 pilot. It's got a vehicle commander, a gunner, and a loadmaster. So again, it's showing that it's a working vehicle. Yeah. 10 passengers.
Cargo capacity.
Its cargo capacity, weirdly, 550 cubic meters. So it doesn't give it in tonnage, it gives it in space, which is sensible. So clearly, this can carry hefty stuff. It can carry many thousands of metric tons of raw material. It's got cargo handling systems, so it's got means of dragging that stuff up and into it independently. It's got a dedicated cargo bed as well, so you would imagine that's a broad area and can take a lot of weight. It's got on a magnetically sealed cargo container, which I think is a great idea, because in A New Hope, when they go into the trash compactor, can't get out because it's magnetically sealed.
Yeah.
And now you've got cargo containers that are probably just as tough. And I wonder, when we did Smuggler's Run in Disneyland, and you're chasing, in the Falcon, you're chasing that Convey X train with those cargo units on the back, and you pick them up. And I wonder how far away they are from the guts, the middle bit of an ACACT. They feel quite similar.
I'd never thought of that.
They're smaller, but they've got the same feel, haven't they?
I automatically thought of it more as like a section of the train from Solo. But you're right. It is more likely to be comparable to that.
And Hasbro released an absolutely fantastic ACACT vehicle, which was just a beauty. It did so much. It was a great size.
Yeah.
It looked amazing.
I wish I'd bought one.
Me too. I don't take many things out of the box. That would have been one thing I would have definitely taken out of the box.
That would have displayed brilliantly,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
it really would. And I wonder, now we've got Andor on the doorstep as we talk. It's not far away. I do wonder whether or not we will see Scarif. It feels like Scarif
I think we should.
If not in season 1, certainly in season 2. But then if we see Scarif, you know that the ACACT and the other defences we saw in Rogue One are going to be on the ground. It's that military installation. I don't know how long Scarif had been there, the Imperial base there.
There's going to be a slightly different time frame to this than there was for Rogue One, so we might even see precursors to that.
Hi, this is Gareth Edwards, director of the best standalone Star Wars film since Caravan of Courage, called Rogue One. You're listening to Panther Tracks. Enjoy.
Wouldn't it be interesting if we saw Hoth? Because
Hoth is such a wasteland, isn't it?
Yeah.
And such the back of beyond.
So there's going to be all sorts of potential for places where we can actually see these walkers in use.
Yeah.
But also the establishing of the bases that can sort of handle these kind of technologies.
Yeah.
So it would be nice.
The infrastructure that...
Yeah, the infrastructure, So it would be a great scene to have somebody like Andor and some of the big chiefs of the fledgling rebellion looking at all these different sort of things that they could potentially come up against and say, how are we going to
counter this? Yeah. Because in Empire, I mean, going back to the AT-AT, it felt very much like Luke had sort of gone, I've got an idea, use your tow cables.
Yeah.
And yet you look at a snowspeeder and think, why else would it have a tow cable? It seems like the perfect, you know.
Why have we taken that out with us, lads?
Yeah, exactly. So it was almost like an idea that, and oh, wow, we've just figured a way to trip up this incredible machine. Yeah. It felt off the cuff. But like you say, logically, you would look at these vehicles and go, what's the weak spot of the Death Star? Oh, it turns out there's a small thermal exhaust port right below the main port. So let's target that we just happen to know, which is the whole point of Rogue One. But all vehicles you would imagine would have something. They've all got a weakness.
Hi, this is John Morton from The Empire Strikes Back. I'm Dak Rotha, or Bespin Boba, and you're listening to Bantha Tracks.
So by the time Return of the Jedi came out, Star Wars had been the biggest movie ever. Empire wasn't far behind. E.T. came and dethroned them both at the box office, and then Return of the Jedi comes out, the final last hurrah, as we saw in Light and Magic, of that original team. But what a last hurrah. Dennis Muren often referred to it as their magnum opus. It was as far as optical could really be pushed, and boy, did they push it. And one of the key vehicles, even though we had seen it in Empire Strikes Back, a slightly different version of the AT-ST, along with the Rancor, which, if you think, are almost like the biological and mechanical versions of each other. The AT-ST is totally a character and really does lead the charge, certainly for the Empire, the Empire's forces, the Grand Forces on Endor in the final third of the film. Were you aware of the AT-ST when Empire came out, or was that something that really came to the fore for Jedi? It certainly was for me. I was kind of new.
Like we were saying earlier, it's a blink and you miss it kind of reference to the Walker. It's just like thrown in there for whimsy almost. But the Scout Walker on Hoth, it's sort of like, oh, that's cool. All your focus is on the AT-AT. Yeah. You get to Endor, and all of a sudden the Scout Walker it's in your face. It's front and centre. And I suppose when you're thinking about the environment that it's in, all those trees, you need something that you can manoeuvre between them. And AT-AT's not going to be ideal for that at all. So the AT-ST, the Scout Walker, the Chicken Walker, whatever you want to call it. Chicken Walker. I remember that being thrown around a few times. It was the right Walker for that environment. What's your first memory of it?
Before the film came out, we got lots of, I think we used to get the Sunday Mail and the local papers like, the Mercury around Birmingham and such. And there was pictures, there was certain sort of stock photos. The very first picture I remember seeing from Jedi was weirdly a Wackling.
Right, yeah.
And it was all tied in with an interview with Carrie Fisher, as I remember. Yeah. But in terms of the AT-ST, it was seeing it in the film. And also they did the collector's edition. Yeah. Which had the sort of the Endor picture on the front.
Yes.
The red Jedi logo, the long wide Jedi logo, white cover with the Endor picture on the front. And there was a whole sequence where Murin and Tippett go into all the details of how they physically made the models work. So that kind of was where I really became, I mean, that particular magazine was what really got my interest. That and Bantha Tracks, obviously I was getting that at the time. But in terms of seeing it on screen, yeah, it is seeing it in that first scene outside the bunker when you really see it for the first time properly.
Yeah.
First tactile memory is going into John Menzies.
Yeah.
And getting buying my Scout Walker from John Menzies.
Right, okay.
I've got a couple and just, oh man, that was such a cool, just pushing the thing on the back just to get the legs go,
Yeah, and then you got to lock it
to stand, again. That's it. Just a brilliant model.
That was a really clever sort of like little thought that they put into that, wasn't it? The fact that you could have it as a standing model or you could actually make it walk. Is there any one standout part of it from Return of the Jedi, a standout moment?
It's not a good moment.
It's probably going to be the same as mine.
It might not
Does
be.
Does it involve some trees?
It definitely involves trees. I mean, there's the two big scenes. There's the log smashing to completely destroy it, which again, when you read that collector's edition book, when they explain how they made what looks like a solid head, but it was made out of an alloy that was like a 100th of an inch thick. Right. It was ridiculous how they did it, so that those logs, those weighted logs, would literally crush it. Yeah. How there wasn't like jam splashing out from the inside. Those two guys would have been marmalised. How there wasn't
marmalised. Just there's a word.
Yeah. How they didn't do that is beyond me. They kind of should have done, but hey ho. And also the scene on the logs, and I still look at that and think, how the heck did they?
I know what you mean.
How did they do that scene with logs? Because those logs are flawless.
Where it's like Bambi on ice.
Exactly, literally like Bambi on ice. And the way they did that is just poetry. And again, the artistry, going back to Light and Magic again, the artistry, and this isn't to knock CG, because CG's made stupidly crazy advances and does stuff that optical never could. But here we go. One of the interviews I did a few years ago was with Dennis Murin, and we talked about this, and I sort of said, had optical gone as far as it could ever get? And he said it was as far as they ever wanted to take it, but I think if we'd put more money into it, we could have took it further. But there was no denying CG. I mean, we've seen Light and Magic. Yeah. The Jurassic episode was the one that really made that stand out. Yeah. But in terms of what they did in Jedi, how they got that ATSD to do the wobbly leg thing was just amazing.
Even now, I don't think they could make that any better now. No. The fact that its legs are all over the place, it's comedic in a certain way, but it's also, how did they do that? Yeah. But yeah, those are my two favourite ATSD moments, the squashed head and the tripping over the logs.
Technical specifications.
It was also built by Q at Drive Yards. It's an all-terrain vehicle, the all-terrain Scout Transport. It's 75,000 credits to buy. Now, we mentioned it earlier, Mandalorian. Yeah. Season 1, I think it was Chapter 4. And you see one of these on Sorgan. Mando's gone there with the kid, ready to take his foot off the gas. Yeah. Pretty much ready to
kick back and
stay there. Yeah, pretty much. And it's only because that bounty hunter tracks them down and takes the shot.
Too perilous for the child.
Exactly. It wasn't safe, so they've decided to move on. But you've got that whole great sequence where Cara Dune really comes into her own as a debut for a character, great debut for the character, and helps them take out the Raider ATSD. Brilliant design.
And brilliantly underused as well.
Yes.
It could have been too much, but it was subtly done, and I benefited from that.
And I don't know what you thought, because you look at the AT-AT and you look at the ACACT, that moment we mentioned with Baze, just feels like the T-Rex turning and looking at the characters in the original Jurassic. Yeah. But actually, it's the ATST in Mandalorian that is the most like the T-Rex.
Yeah, you're right. Probably because the environment where you have it crashing through the trees, it's that hidden menace kind of idea.
It feels heavier, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's got weight to it.
Yeah, it does. And it does. It feels way more imposing than it does in Jedi. I suppose probably because we're used to that bigger scale and we've come down to the ATST. Yeah. Whereas with this, we haven't had walkers for a little while, and we all of a sudden, ATST. And the fact that it was pimped, if you
literally pimped. And I mean, it cost 75,000 credits. You've got to wonder, did they? I don't suppose those Raiders bought it. They acquired it, exactly. I think that makes way more sense.
Technical specifications.
6.4 metres in length, 4.5 metres wide, just over 9 metres high. So it's a diddly little thing compared to an AT-AT, but nevertheless, it's a significant vehicle. And it can run at 90 miles an hour over flat terrain. So it can do 75 miles an hour. It's a pretty fast vehicle. We've never seen one of these flat out.
Full pelts. No. But I mean, you were talking about the speed of the AT-AT earlier. I mean, was that 50 mile an hour?
50 for the ACACT, 60 for the AT-AT.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy speeds. I mean, it'd be interesting to see them do that.
Yeah.
or would it?
Or
I
would
don't
it?
know. I mean,
Yeah.
it might sort of cloud your memories a bit, but yeah, the fact that an ATST can do 90.
90 kilometres an hour. That is I would love to see that. Please, Lucasfilm, show us an ATST going at full tilt.
And then I want to see a protocol droid with a speed camera clocking it as it goes past.
I'll pay for that.
Weapons systems.
It's got a chin-mounted Tamanbach MS4 twin blaster cannon, so hefty cannons. Cheek-mounted, as we mentioned earlier, Yauv Gunsmith 88i twin light blaster cannon. So it's got these to the one side. Cheek-mounted Dimec DW3 concussion grenade launcher to the other side. So it's got that's that sort of the multiple cartridge to the side. It's got a missile launcher.
Crew complement.
Needs a crew of 2, a driver and a gunner. So we saw that in Jedi with Robert Watts and Richard Marquand.
Yeah,
and it's got room for one person at the back, rather cramped, with Chewie and a couple of Ewoks, which I think was brilliant. Such a great vehicle. We've seen it on snow. We've seen it in a city environment on Jeddah. We see it in a forest in Endor. So it's definitely a vehicle that you could imagine. I mean, I wonder if they ever have any on. I mean, we go into Coruscant in Andor. Could you see an ATST in the streets of Coruscant? You wouldn't expect an AT-AT. You feel like an AT-AT, you would send it out into big military open area engagements. You can take a hammer in. It's going to take a lot to get an AT-AT down. ATSTs aren't designed to go into combat, but they can look after themselves. An ATST feels like it can go wherever it needs to go.
Yeah, it's not much of a stretch to imagine it on Tatooine. We had it on Jeddah. Would be good to see it appear in Andor. Maybe on a familiar planet. Maybe if they throw Dantooine in there or something, we see them raiding Dantooine. That'd be great. I mean, of course, in the prequels, there are even smaller versions again where you've got the rider sitting on the walker.
Yeah.
So there's an evolution of the individual different walkers anyway. And potentially, when we come back to The Mandalorian, or maybe even whatever comes next for Boba Fett, we could see another evolution again.
How do you feel about that? Just as an aside question, because when we were kids, there was stormtroopers, and then there was snowtroopers, and there was sandtroopers, and there was biker scouts, and there was quite a limited amount of armoured characters. When you got to the prequel trilogy, there was loads. You get to the sequel trilogy, there's loads. As you've gone through canon, the new era, but I mean, the Mandalorian added stuff, the Solo added the Mud Troopers, Scarif Troopers in Rogue One. So there's all these different types of armour, and I wasn't so sure at first, but now, increasingly, I love the variants. So if there was another variant of an AT-AT, we see the evolution in Force Awakens and in Last Jedi. You're open to that. You welcome these additions.
As a kid, we accepted the fact that we've got different troopers for different environments.
Yeah.
Perhaps they do push it a little bit these days.
They do.
But it's always interesting to see something else that brings that original concept. John Mollo?
Yeah, Mollo worked on it. Obviously, Macquarie worked on it.
Yeah. And the fact that you can see some of the original concepts being brought in, where you get the heavier brow on the trooper helmet, which for me, it's an acceptable thing. And I think probably because we're not so likely to be expecting a huge toy to come out like they used to back then.
Sure.
It's just nice to see it anyway, isn't it?
Thanks for listening to Start Your Engines. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit panthertracks.com or check out the free Panther Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. Do you follow us on the app, Paul?
I follow you into battle, sir, every day.
I love it. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@panthertracks.com. So any questions, any queries, any corrections, anything you think we've missed, or things you want us to talk about, we will talk about it on Start Your Engines. Send us a question, Paul.
You want me to send you a question?
Anything you like.
How big is a TIE fighter's wing?
Comment, like and share on any. I'll find out and answer next time. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Panther Tracks, and be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcast. You can listen to episode 2. We talk about TIE fighters in episode 2.
Well, I could. I'll listen to that there.
There you go.
I'm just encouraging other people to do so.
Listen to that one. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Panther Tracks intro and our Start Your Engines opening music, Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers, and of course the data miners at Wikipedia. Remember, tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK, 4 p.m. Eastern, and 1 p.m. Pacific on Facebook and YouTube. And check out our Panther Tracks Radio Friday night rotation every Friday night, 7 o'clock UK time, for new episodes of The Panther from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks. And every Tuesday night, 7 o'clock UK time, for your weekly episode of Making Tracks. And that's me done for this episode.
I thought a data miner was a young android from Star Trek.
Coming up next on Panther Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.